Well, hello and welcome to Subversive Radio. I'm your host, Keith Giles. I want to thank you for listening in. I want to apologize for a couple of things. One, it has been a little bit of time since my last Subversive Radio podcast. I want to apologize for the long break. Secondly, I want to apologize for the quality of the most recent podcasts that I was doing. I was using a different service. I took a chance on Blog Talk Radio for a while, mostly because I wanted to use their service, which allows me to have people call into the program using Skype. So I could do a series of interviews, and we did those interviews, and most of those came out really well. The last couple of ones I did, the quality wasn't so great. So again, I apologize for that. I have since canceled that account. From going forward, we're going to move forward using Spreaker again, which is much better quality, which I hope you can tell, much better quality of recording. And so anyway, we're back. And I want to do a Subversive Radio podcast on a topic which unfortunately is really, really popular right now, which is this idea of the blood moon, or the blood moon prophecy. And so originally on my blog, about a week or so ago, I wrote an article called The Blood Moon Hoax Exposed. And I was amazed at the response. First of all, the reason I did it, I don't normally write about end times prophecy. I don't normally, certainly this is the first time I've ever done a podcast about end times prophecy. Really, I did a little bit on the Olivet Discourse a while back. And that was really more to just address dispensationalism. But because I just was seeing a lot going on, and plus we just recently went through a blood moon or a lunar eclipse just a few weeks ago. This brings everything back up again. Everybody gets all hyped up about this. So I want to explain what it is, and I want to expose the hoax around it, and hopefully to bring some clarity to this. I will say, by the way, as I mentioned, the response to this topic on my blog has been ridiculous. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a heads up, a little bit of behind the scenes info about my blog. So a typical blog post for me gets around 200 or 300 hits in about a week or so. About a week. A good one, a really good one, might hit 600 or 700. I've got a few that in the lifetime of the over a period of years, some of them have gotten hits in like 3,000, 4,000 hits, but it takes about 2 or 3 years to get 3,000 or 4,000 hits on a particular, say, a really, really popular blog post. This one on the blood moons that I published October the 9th, within 3 days, I was at 6,000. Within a matter of days. It was instantly the most read post ever on my blog, and it did it in a matter of days. It is now, as of October the 18th, over 10,000, headed to 11,000, and I expect it to keep going. And not because that blog post is especially well written. No. I have blogs that are much better written than that. Obviously, it's just because this topic is such a hot button topic. And as I said, we just went through a lunar eclipse, so this is kind of on the brain. Let's get into it, okay? So briefly, I'm going to explain to you. You'll have a lot more detail, by the way, if you read the blog. Go to keithgiles.com and you'll see the blood moon hoax exposed, and I have another one called the top 10 things you need to know about the blood moon conspiracy or prophecy. So there's a couple of books out there that are very popular right now. One by John Hagee, and another one by a guy, I think his name is Blitz or something like that. At any rate, Mark Blitz. So at any rate, their theory is this, that what we have coming up, well, I guess we're kind of in the middle of it at this point, is what's called a tetrarch. And a tetrarch is a series of 4 blood moons, or really 4 lunar eclipses, that happen to coincide with Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, with these are Jewish feasts. And so we had one April the 15th of this year. We had one October the 6th, I believe. We're going to have another one April the 4th next year, and another one, and that's the Passover of next year, April the 4th, and then we're going to have another one in the Tabernacles, September the 28th of next year. And so, wow, right? That's amazing. 4 lunar eclipses, all 4 of them coinciding exactly on the dates of Passover and Tabernacles in 2014 and again in 2015. 4 in a row. That's unprecedented. That must mean there is some significance prophetically of what's going to happen in the Middle East, maybe even the return of Christ. Or at least that's what these guys want you and I to believe. But there's a couple of things that they're not telling you, and that's what I want to expose on the podcast. One of them is this, just a very simple, basic detail that if you understand this detail, it makes the novelty of, oh my gosh, a lunar eclipse on Passover and Tabernacles in 2 years in a row, or 4 lunar eclipses in a row, that's crazy. Unless someone explains to you that the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. Yes. And that they celebrate the Passover feast on a full moon. And they celebrate the Passover, the Tabernacles, Feast of Tabernacles, on a full moon. So you only can have a lunar eclipse during a full moon. So you're kind of hedging your bets there. We have lunar eclipses all the time. It's not rare to have a lunar eclipse during the year. If every time you have a Passover or a Feast of Tabernacles, it's a full moon, you're quite likely to have a lunar eclipse pretty often on those dates. And it's just not a sign of anything other than the fact that Earth, our moon, has a lot of lunar eclipses. And we're going to get into that in just a second. So that's the first thing you need to know, is that it's not unusual and that the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. And again, the other thing is this, that when these guys say something is going to happen, they're careful not to say, or at least I think at least one of them is, I'm not sure about what Blintz says, but they're careful not to say Jesus will return. Okay, they're not going to go that far. But something, and this is part of the maddening thing about this whole idea, is that something will happen. Well, if you wait long enough, something will happen in the Middle East, won't it? Aren't there things going on in the Middle East all the time? Well, yeah, it's kind of a volatile part of the world. The fact that there are lunar eclipses there isn't shocking, or around the world that there are lunar eclipses is not shocking. The fact that those lunar eclipses coincide with a lunar calendar is not shocking. The fact that things are happening in the Middle East that are crazy is not shocking. So, not a big deal. But this idea that something, quote-unquote, something is going to happen is so random. It's basically like we're just going to wait around, and then when something cool happens or something amazing happens, then they're going to say, there it is, that was it, that's what we were waiting for. Not the way to do prophecy, or not the way... And by the way, there is no scriptural evidence or prophetic connection to lunar eclipses and the return of Christ, etc. Where to go next? Okay, so that was the idea that it's a lunar calendar, and that's not rare. This idea of the tetrarchs. Remember, tetrarchs are a series of 4 lunar eclipses in a row. Okay, 4 consecutive lunar eclipses on Passover and Tabernacle feast days. It has actually happened a total of 7 times before this. What we're going through right now is the 8th one. Okay? But going back to 162 AD, okay, there was one in 162 AD, there was one in 795 AD, there was one in 842 AD, there was one in 860 AD, there was one in 1492, then in 1948, and then in 1967, and now we're going through one right now in 2014 and 15, okay? Here's what you need to know about that. In those previous 7 tetrarch events, nothing happened. That means that nothing historically or significant happened in the Middle East or to the Jewish people in 162, 795, 842, 860, 1492, 1948, or 1967. Nothing. Okay? Now, in the book, they do try to make connections to some of those dates as being significant, and that the eclipses being quote-unquote signs of those events. Okay? It's one of those things where basically, yes, significant things happen during those years, but was the lunar eclipse a quote-unquote sign that was going to happen? Okay? So let's go to the recent ones that they're trying to say are connected to and prophesied by or signs of significant events in the Middle East or to Jewish people. There was a lunar eclipse or a series of tetrarchs in 1492. Okay? And they want to say that it was a sign of the expulsion of Jews from Spain. But here's why it can't be. Because if you go and look at the history of the expulsion of Jewish people from the country of Spain, there was a tribunal that made a ruling to expel the Jews, and that was established November the 1st, 1478. That was 15 years before the Tetrarch in 1492. 15 years. 1-5. Okay? That's hardly a sign or a warning, is it? In other words, the tribunal came first. They met 15 years earlier and then said they were going to kick the Jews out of Spain. And then 15 years later, there was this Tetrarch. How can that be a sign? It's sort of like the sign shouldn't come after the event. The sign should come first, and then that's a warning to you that something's going to happen, and then the thing happens. Okay. 15 years difference, that's huge. That's like saying, hey, watch out for that car 15 years after I've had my car accident. It doesn't do any good to warn me that there's a car coming and that I'm going to hit it 15 years after I've already had the accident. So that's not a sign or a warning. There was also something called the Alhambra Decree, which officially ordered the expulsion of Jews from Spain, and that was issued in January of 1492, but that was 15 months before the Tetrarch happened in 1492. Again, 15 months before. So again, these aren't signs. There are no connections, okay? And again, it doesn't... the other part of this puzzle piece that's missing is to point to something, let's say like a lunar eclipse, okay, or a celestial event, and say, this is a sign from God that people need to observe. Okay, first of all, the timing is way off. 15 years is way off, number one. Number two, that's not how God does things in prophecy. If you look at the scriptures, God sends a prophet, and the prophet says, thus saith the Lord, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, God is going to do this to you. And a sign of it will be this, a lunar eclipse, or an event in the heavens, or the water turned to blood, or a plague of locusts, or something like that. Okay, nobody prophesied that the Jews were going to be kicked out of Spain in 1492. Nobody. There was no prophetic utterance about that. Okay, the fact that there was a lunar eclipse, or a series of lunar eclipses, or a series of tetrarchs up and around that time period, it's like saying, it's like trying to connect the migration of Canada geese, which, by the way, happens about the same time every year. That's not unusual. Canada geese migrate. But saying, well, hey, these Canada geese migrated right about the time there was something that happened in Chinese politics or the Chinese economy. Yeah, maybe. But why would you think that the migration of Canada geese would have any impact on Chinese policy or politics? There's no connection there. It's ridiculous. Okay. Another one is 1948. So there was a series of tetrarchs around 1948. And again, they want to say that was a sign of the Israeli War of Independence. But it's not. Again, and here's why. Because that war began on May 15th, 1948. It ended on March 10th, 1949. And the first of the 4 lunar eclipses didn't happen until just over a month after the war was over. Again, the war happened, and then after it was over, the first of the 4 lunar eclipses didn't start until a month later. Okay, again, what's the point of God giving a sign about something for an event that's already taken place? That is not a sign from God. Okay, another one, the one in 1967, they want to tell you that series of tetrarchs was a sign of Israeli forces taking possession of the city of Jerusalem. Again, that doesn't work as a sign from God, because that event took place June 7th, 1967, and the lunar eclipse took place 44 days before that. But here's the important thing. You would say, oh, wow, that happened before, right? Right, it did. It was 44 days before that event. But that lunar eclipse wasn't visible from Jerusalem or the Middle East. By the way, much like the lunar eclipse we just had this month in October, a few weeks ago, was visible all over the world, except there was a blackout. Nobody could see it in the Middle East. So again, it's pointless to be a sign for people that can't see it. It doesn't make any sense. And then anyway, going back to what happened in 1967, the following set of blood moons followed over the next year and a half, again, way after that event had already taken place. So again, these are not signs of anything, and no one prophesied that these things were going to happen in advance, and so that none of these things were fulfillments of any prophecies. Okay. Here's another thing that they don't tell you, is that there have been 55 blood moons or lunar eclipses since the 1st century AD. Okay, 7 of them coincided with Jewish holy days, but none of them were seen as signs of anything significant. And let's flip that around. Here are some dates, okay, that were very significant to the Jewish people. I'm going to just read some dates for you. These dates were extremely significant to the Jewish people. Here they are. 1446 BC, Israel left Egypt in the Exodus. 1406 BC, Joshua entered Canaan. 723 BC, the 10 northern tribes went into captivity in Assyria. 587 BC, Judah went into Babylonian captivity. 538, Cyrus proclaimed that the Jews could return to Canaan. 533 BC, the Jews began to return from Babylon and arrived in Jerusalem. Okay, right, let's just stop for a second. All of those dates I just read you, there were no lunar eclipses, there were no blood moons, but yet those are some of the most significant events in Jewish history. No lunar eclipse, no tetrarchs. Okay, so are tetrarchs signs? Are tetrarchs things that God uses to signify important events are about to happen to the Jewish people? No, they are not. But there was also no lunar eclipse when Jesus was born in 1 or 2 BC. There was no lunar eclipse when Jesus was crucified in 33 AD. Now, there was a solar eclipse, but not a lunar eclipse. 70 AD, when Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed, no lunar eclipse. 135 AD, when Hadrian renamed the city of Jerusalem and killed many of the Jews, no lunar eclipse. 1943, when Hitler killed 6 million Jews during the Holocaust, no tetrarchs, no blood moons. Do you think those events were worthy of a tetrarch event? I mean, those are extremely significant events in Jewish history. Probably the most significant events in Jewish history. None of them coincide with blood moons or tetrarchs. Okay? It's just, simply speaking, signs of nothing. And so I want you to know you shouldn't waste your money. Don't buy the books. Don't buy the DVD sets. Don't buy the sermon series. Don't pay any money. Don't give these guys your money. Okay? They're just taking your money. And they're doing a very good job of it, because going back to what I said about my blog post, my blogs on my blog typically, 400 or 500 hits a week. I write one post about a blood moon and it hits 10,000 hits. Do you know why that is? Again, not because it's such a greatly written article. It's because people are Googling blood moon. They are crazy about it. They're excited about it. They're worried about it. They're fearful about it. It's probably the reason you're listening to this podcast right now. You've heard about this. You're wondering about it. Is this the sign of the end times? Is Jesus coming back any second? Do these blood moons really signify something important is going on? No. No, they do not. And I can say that with authority and with conviction and with certainty, because I can look at history, recent history. I can look at biblical history, and I can look at what the Bible says about these blood moons, and there is nothing about it. So, hang on to your money, trust in the Lord, do not fear, do not give in to this hype. The blood moons are beautiful. They're lunar eclipses that happen quite often. Several times a year we have lunar eclipses. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. So the Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles will always happen on full moons, and lunar eclipses can only take place during full moons. The fact that there is a blood moon, full moon, lunar eclipse during Passover or during Feast of Tabernacles is not that rare or unusual. And it is not a sign of anything. No one has prophesied, no prophet of God has prophesied that something is going to happen. Here's what the guys who wrote these books are saying is going to happen. And I'm not kidding you. Something. That means anything that happens, they're just going to say, there it is. I'm right. See, my book was right. Something happened in that 2-year time span. And if you want to follow the pattern of what we've seen in the past, they can wait 15 months after it's over and say, look, there you go. There was a sign. Or go back 15 years or months before this and say, well, pick something else and say that was a sign. But I'm telling you, it's not a sign of anything. I want to also do a podcast coming up on the Mark of the Beast. And so my next podcast will probably be about the Mark of the Beast. What is the Mark of the Beast? How do we know what it is? I'm going to tell you right now, it's a spoiler alert. It's not a microchip. It's not a barcode. It's not your credit card. It's not some tattoo you're going to be given by the Antichrist. The Bible is very clear about who the beast is and what the mark of the beast is. And I can't wait to share that with you in our next podcast. Thanks for listening. God bless, and let the kingdom come. Good night.